Depression Symptoms, Major Depressive Disorder, by Steve Bressert, Ph.D. The symptoms of depression, technically referred to as major depressive disorder, are characterized by an overwhelming feeling of sadness, isolation, and despair that lasts 2 weeks or longer at a time. Depression isn't just an occasional feeling of being sad or lonely, like most people experience from time to time. Instead, a person feels like they've sunk into a deep, dark hole with no way out, and no hope for things ever changing. A person who suffers from a major depressive disorder, sometimes also referred to as clinical depression or simply depression, must either have a depressed mood or a loss of interest or pleasure in daily activities consistently for at least a 2-week period. This depressed mood must represent a significant change from the person's normal mood. Social, occupational, educational, or other important functioning must also be negatively impacted by the change in mood. For instance, when a person who's depressed starts missing work or school, or has stopped going to classes or their usual social engagements such as hanging out with friends. Bipolar disorder, formerly called manic depression, is a mental health condition that causes extreme mood swings that included emotional highs, mania or hypomania, and lows, depression. When you become depressed, you may feel sad or hopeless and lose interest or pleasure in most activities. When your mood shifts to mania or hypomania, less extreme than mania, you may feel euphoric, full of energy, or unusually irritable. These mood swings can affect sleep, energy, activity, judgment, behavior, and the ability to think clearly. Although bipolar disorder is a lifelong condition, you can manage your mood swings and other symptoms by following a treatment plan. In most cases, bipolar disorder is treated with medications and psychological counseling, psychotherapy. Sex addiction, of course, has nothing to do with sex. Any sexual act or apparent perversion has no meaning outside of its psychological, unconscious context. What sets sex addiction apart from other addictions and makes it so persistent is that the subject of sex touches on our innermost unconscious wishes and fears, our sense of self, our very identity. While the definition of sex addiction is the same as that of other addictions, recurrent failure to control the behavior and continuation of the behavior despite increasingly harmful consequences, sexual compulsion is set apart from other addictions, in that sex involves our innermost unconscious wishes, fears, and conflicts. Sex addiction is a symbolic enactment of deeply entrenched unconscious dysfunctional relationships with self and others. It involves a derailed developmental process that occurred as a result of inadequate parenting. People who intentionally starve themselves suffer from an eating disorder called anorexia nervosa. The disorder, which usually begins in young people around the time of puberty, involves extreme weight loss that is less than what is considered minimally normal. Many people with the disorder look emaciated but are convinced they are overweight. Sometimes, they must be hospitalized to prevent starvation. People with anorexia typically starve themselves, even though they suffer terribly from hunger pains. One of the most frightening aspects of the disorder is that people with anorexia continue to think they are overweight even when they are bone thin. For reasons not yet understood, they become terrified of gaining any weight. Food and weight become obsessions. For some, the compulsiveness shows up in strange eating rituals or the refusal to eat in front of others. It is not uncommon for people with anorexia to collect recipes and prepare gourmet feasts for family and friends, but not partake in the meals themselves. They may adhere to strict exercise routines to keep off weight. Loss of monthly menstrual periods is typical in women with the disorder. Men with anorexia often become impotent. Dissociation is a mental process which produces a lack of connection in a person's thoughts, memories, feelings, actions, or sense of identity. During the period of time when a person is dissociating, certain information is not associated with other information as it normally would be. For example, during a traumatic experience, a person may dissociate the memory of the place and circumstances of the trauma from his ongoing memory, resulting in a temporary mental escape from the fear and pain of the trauma and, in some cases, a memory gap surrounding the experience. Because this process can produce changes in memory, people who frequently dissociate often find their senses of personal history and identity are affected. Most clinicians believe that dissociation exists on a continuum of severity. This continuum reflects a wide range of experiences and/or symptoms. At one end are mild dissociative experiences common to most people, such as daydreaming, highway hypnosis, or getting lost in a book or movie, all of which involve losing touch with conscious awareness of one's immediate surroundings. At the other extreme is complex, chronic dissociation, such as in cases of dissociative disorders, which may result in serious impairment or inability to function. Some people with dissociative disorders can hold highly responsible jobs, contributing to society in a variety of professions, the arts, and public service, appearing to function normally to co-workers, neighbors, and others with whom they interact daily. There is a great deal of overlap of symptoms and experiences among the various dissociative disorders, including dissociative identity disorder, DID. Individuals should seek help from qualified mental health providers to answer questions about their own particular circumstances and diagnoses. Do people actually have multiple personalities? Yes and no. One of the reasons for the decision by the psychiatric community to change the disorder's name from multiple personality disorder to dissociative identity disorder, DID, is that multiple personalities is somewhat of a misleading term. A person diagnosed with DID feels as if she has within her two or more entities, or personality states, each with its own independent way of relating, perceiving, thinking, and remembering about herself and her life. If two or more of these entities take control of the person's behavior at a given time, a diagnosis of DID can be made. These entities previously were often called personalities, even though the term did not accurately reflect the common definition of the word as the total aspect of our psychological makeup. Other terms often used by therapists and survivors to describe these entities are alternate personalities, alters, parts, states of consciousness, ego states, and identities. It is important to keep in mind that although these alternate states may appear to be very different, they are all manifestations of a single person. Sexual masochism, over a period of at least 6 months, recurrent, intense sexually arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors involving the act, real, not simulated, of being humiliated, beaten, bound, or otherwise made to suffer. This is due to rape or other sexual abuse traits in the male or female victim's life. The fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. With asphyxia, philia is a specifier given to the disorder name if the individual engages in the practice of achieving sexual arousal related to restriction of breathing. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is a mental disorder whose main symptoms included obsessions and compulsions, driving the person to engage in unwanted, oftentimes distress behaviors or thoughts. It is treatment through a combination of psychiatric medications and psychotherapy. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, is an anxiety disorder characterized by recurrent and disturbing thoughts, called obsessions, and/or repetitive, ritualized behaviors that the person feels driven to perform, called compulsions. Obsessions can also take the form of intrusive images or unwanted impulses. The majority of people with OCD have both obsessions and compulsions, but a minority, about 20%, have obsessions alone or compulsions alone, about 10%. The person with OCD usually tries to actively dismiss the obsessions or neutralize them by engaging in compulsions or avoiding situations that trigger them. In most cases, compulsions serve to alleviate anxiety. However, it is not uncommon for the compulsions themselves to cause anxiety, especially when they become very demanding. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event, either experiencing it or witnessing it. Symptoms may include flashbacks, nightmares and severe anxiety, as well as uncontrollable thoughts about the event. Most people who go through traumatic events may have temporary difficulty adjusting and coping, but with time and good self-care, they usually get better. If the symptoms get worse, last for months or even years, and interfere with your day-to-day functioning, you may have PTSD.